Welcome to Steven.G Studios here in Old Towne, Petersburg, Virginia. Well, it's about time that I paint the Cyclorama. It's been a good long while. I've had some photo shoots here, some video shoots, and I've done some other type of work. It's basically been like a workshop, and it shows. It's quite a mess. And I'll be honest, I'm not too worried about making a mess on this thing because it gets dirty just by sitting here by itself. But as soon as you step on it with your shoes, it's going to leave a mark. And that's just how a cyclorama is, especially if it's painted white, which most of them are. So I thought if you're contemplating building a cyclorama, if you want a cyclorama, and if you use one, you might get a kick out of this video. This is not a very big one, but it gets filthy. It's just how it's going to be. It's painted white. But it looks beautiful when it is white. It almost disappears, as if you're looking into infinity. You can't even see it, which is pretty cool. But it needs to be painted. And I'm going to do, or at least I'm going to try, to do some work here in the studio, some portraiture work. The economy's bad. Business is dead. Even my best customers, my best clients, very little to no work. So I'm going to pull a George Costanza. I'm going to do the opposite of what I think I should do.
I should do the opposite. I should.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Yes. I will do the opposite.
So I got to clean this up so that it's ready for shoots. Now, of course, the walls, they stay clean, but the floor, as you can see, is filthy. So I'm gonna mix my paint up. I don't spend a lot of money on the white paint. I just get a flat white paint from a store, a discount store. And you want matte, flat. I bought semi-gloss by mistake one time, and I'm putting it on and I realized what it is, and it really is horrible because the glare. You get glare when you're using lighting. It's got to be matte. It's got to be a flat finish, and so that's what I have here. And there you go. But this video is not going to just be me painting the cyclorama. No, I actually found all the footage I had taken of me building the cyclorama. So when I first rented the space, of course I painted the whole place, but I built this cyclorama here. So I'm going to show you the construction process from the start to the finish. And of course you can see the finish here. And again, it's not perfect. Old building, there's a lot of movement in the floor, and so that causes the bottom to pucker a little bit. Of course, I didn't realize that at the time. And then the corners are quite a thing in a cyclorama. And I'm no math genius, and I'm not good with geometry, so I kind of figured it out the way I figure things out. And you'll see that here a little bit. But if you're interested in building a cyclorama, if you want to know how to do that, it's not complicated at all. And through this video, you should see how you can do it. And I'll talk you through some of the steps that I took. And there are other videos and web pages that discuss the construction of a cyclorama. This was even more difficult because this is not a 90-degree corner. So this wall is kind of at an angle, so it kind of comes in, and then you've got your straight line here. That made that even more difficult to figure out. And so I gave up trying to work it out on paper and just made it, worked it out as I went. So there's a lot of plaster right there, but it works. It looks good. You would never know. So anyway, enjoy a look back on the construction of a cyclorama. If you want to build your own, hopefully you'll learn a few things here. And if you do that, I'd love to see your cyclorama if you end up building one or if you have one now. All right, well, here we go. So there is the beardless Steven. So I've been in the studio for a little while now and repainted the interior, cut up some of the carpet, and now I'm working on the cyclorama. And so I'm building a wall which will become the back wall of the cyclorama. It's not structural, so it's not going to support anything. So I didn't have to be a professional carpenter to do this. But here I am building that wall, And again, the two windows on the back wall, I don't get it. What were they thinking when they built the interior of this building? Windows that look in on another room? I don't get that functionality at all. But here you see me building that back wall. And I built it just like I would a standard wall with a 16-inch gap in between the studs. And again, I'm not a professional carpenter, although I do a lot of woodwork for my own little projects. But there goes up the wall, and I had to build around the vent there, which I eventually took down. It just was in the way, and there's not much air that makes it through that vent there, so it really didn't do any good. The heating and cooling in this space is really bad. But there I'm attaching the wall to the real wall. Look at me go. All right, and now I've got to start on the next wall. And the same thing, just built the wall on the floor, which is a typical way of doing that. It did leave a little gap against the other wall, but I didn't think that was a big deal. And again, that vent tube there was an issue the whole time, working around that. But I soon found that the owner wasn't too concerned about adjustments I made to the space. Of course, he let me build the cyclorama, but he also let me take down that tube there. Just a little word on purchasing this stuff from a discount store. It sits for a long time, and it gets quite separated and chunky. So you'll be doing this forever. So I encourage you to get a mixer for your drill and do it that way. But don't go nuts with it. Nice and creamy. And here I'm so very unsafely cutting the ribs that'll go along the bottom of the wall, which gives the curve from the wall to the floor. And I just used what I had on hand, so I had a lot of plywood scrap, and that's what I used. And that wasn't it wasn't a problem at all, except for the corner. The corner I found, and I'll talk about that when I get there, I should have used something else, but for the walls, the plywood was fine for a rib. Probably could have done with a little bit thicker, but I used what I had on hand, trying to save funds for this project. But I cut one out, and then I sanded that, got that like I wanted, and then I'll show you how I got all the ribs to basically be about the same, the curve about the same. It didn't have to be perfect, again, because the MDF board would kind of hide some of it's not going to translate any slight variation in the curve. If it's major, yeah, but slight, not a big deal. But I had to cut quite a few of those out. So a lot of repetitious work in building a cyclorama. And so you see what I've done here. I've taken a bunch of the ribs that I've cut and I screwed them together and then sanded them. This was actually the first try at the rib, and then I had to make an adjustment, which you'll see right here. So see that? No corner on the ribs. It just made the whole installation a lot easier. And the notch at the very tip is for the blocking I just put in. So there's blocking you run across the ribs. And again, it's not super important that it's perfect. And there we go, there's the blocking. But it just lends some support to the MDF, especially if somebody were to stand on it, it wouldn't, punch through necessarily. I used to use a tray and paint like a normal person, but what's the point? I just pour the paint out and paint it onto the surface. No need to do the paint tray and all that. And the other thing too is, of course, sweep and clean as best you can, but you're not going to get everything, and I don't even worry about it. Anything that's left here will just add to the paint. Dust, it doesn't matter. This thing gets painted so often that just adds to the thickness of the paint. But yeah, this is all I do. Just pour it out and go from there. And what you don't want to do is leave glops of paint on the wall, because that can cast some shadow. So you want to be a little careful. But again, if it's well lit, it's not going to show. And then if you're lighting it so that it's dark, again, not going to show. So it's probably the simplest paint job you will do. Now the corner is a little bit trickier because you're not going to get paint roller in here. And two, with a cyclorama, you can paint it any color you want. So if you're going to do a big shoot and they want a certain color, you can just paint it that color. I actually had a wedding in here and we painted this a green color that the bride and groom wanted, so it is versatile. Okay, and here I am doing some finishing touches on the wall, but I'm going to start installing the MDF, so there I go. And I didn't record all the work that I did, so you can see the ribs for the corner. They're a little bit different. They should have been a lot thicker. It would have made my life a lot easier when putting in the strips that you'll see me doing soon enough. But the MDF is flexible enough. I'm trying to think if 1/8 of an inch thickness, a little more than that, but enough so that it bends there in the curve. And you want to install it so that you don't cut it on the curve comes down, and you have a little bit of the flatness on the floor, and that's where you want to cut it, and then connect it to a board that just lays flat on the floor. Man, I had trouble getting that piece in there. I worked on that for quite a while and finally popped in place, and I got it screwed in. And now I'm cutting strips for the corner, the bottom corner. Lots and lots of strips, and then you can see me here gluing and screwing these in. And this is where the problem came with the thickness of the ribs. It should have been thicker. I was having trouble screwing the strips in there. The plywood would want to come apart because it was so thin, and so I struggled a little bit with making that work. But this was probably one of the more tedious parts of this construction project, trying to build some kind of structure that I could then put plaster to get to a nice smooth surface. And again, because it wasn't a right angle, it wasn't 90-degree angle in the corner, it was a bit odd. There you go, see all the strips I put in? And then I'd use, I can't remember exactly what I used. I used some kind of thin cloth to kind of spread the gap there, get across the gap. But here's a piece, because of that weird corner, I had to cut this oddball piece out and make it pop in. And it was a lot like a puzzle. If you cut it correctly, it would pop in place. And then you just had to reinforce it with some screws. Now, of course, with the shifting of the floor, those lines have kind of reappeared. They've pulled apart because the building moves so much between the seasons. But again, if you light this Cyclorama correctly, you really won't make those out. And if you do, it's easy to remove them in post. Use Photoshop to get rid of them. But I think you can use anything. Lightroom will even let you make edits like that. So here we are, basically finished with all the installation. All the MDF is in, and now I'm sanding all of the wood putty I used for the gaps between the panels and the screw holes. And man, this seemed like it never would end. I spent so much time sanding, then putting a little bit more wood putty in there. The wood putty though, it's like rock when it dries, and so it's tough to sand. And so I did a lot of that. It just seemed like it would never end. As I did research for building the Cyclorama, I found a manual basically on how to build one from a company called Syrp. They made camera gear, and I guess they were bought out. I think they were bought out by another company. I'm not sure who that might be. But I've got the PDF that they had available on their website, but their website's gone. But the company was Syrp, S-Y-R-P, and I got the guide in 2020. But that's how I figured out how to make the ribs and the blocking, and figured all that out, even the curvature. So if you're interested, if you watch the video and you'd like to have that manual, I don't know if there's any copyright on it now. If they were bought out by another company, I'm sure they own anything that Syrp created. But if you want it, shoot me a message and I'll be happy to email you a PDF. It's got some good diagrams in there of the ribs and basically the entire structure of the wall. And so I did use that in coming up with my plans for the Cyclorama. So I do need to get out of here. So what I'll do is I'll leave me a little walking space, go back to my office, and then before I leave tonight, I'll paint myself out. So that's half a can of paint just for that one coat. Alrighty, the paint is actually already dried. Did so pretty quickly, and you can tell I need to do another coat. So I'm going to put down another coat of what I did before, and then of course I'm going to do my little walkway. So I'm going to paint myself out of the studio. Would you not agree that I needed to paint the Cyclorama? Wow. I knew it was filthy, but compared to the white, whew, that is nasty. And then we'll see how it looks tomorrow morning. See you then. Good morning on this rainy day here in Old Towne, Petersburg, Virginia. Back in the studio, and the paint is dry. And it looks great, it looks much better. There's a few spots where I need to touch it up a little bit, but overall, it looks fantastic. And so that's what it's like having a Cyclorama. It's great to use in your photo and video shoots, simplifies the background a lot, but it gets dirty. So there's a lot of painting, a lot of upkeep. But overall, I love having it. It looks great. And when it's nice and clean, it looks amazing. Almost like that scene in the original Willy Wonka. The little boy was shrunk really tiny. That's what it reminds me of.
Television.
It's Wonka. Now, I suppose you all know how ordinary television works. You photograph something.
Sure, I do. You photograph something, then the photographs are split up into millions of tiny pieces, and they go whizzing through the air down to your TV set where they're all put together again in the right order.
You should open your mouth a little wider when you speak.
If you have any questions about building the Cyclorama, if I didn't really go into enough detail, or you want to know more, feel free to drop me a line. You can do it in the comments or send me an email, and I'll try to answer your questions. But there you go. There's my Cyclorama, or Psych, as the cool kids say.